Okay, and we are recording.
I'll admit them now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Michael, are we sharing my screen yet? No.
Not yet. There we go. Now it's coming through.
Hi. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We are letting people in from the lobby, and we will get started here shortly. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Esteban Martinez. I am the Senior Economic Development Coordinator with the Technology and Innovation Office at EDNM. I'm joined today by a couple of team members of our TO team. Lindsay Humphreys, our Associate Director, is on the call, and I'm also joined by Michael Prosnett. He's also an Economic Development Coordinator with TO. Michael's joining us. He's going to help us with our Q&A session we will have at the end of today's presentation. I want to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded and will be available on both our website and YouTube channel after this webinar. Today, we will be discussing the New Mexico Science and Technology Business Startup Grant. We truly appreciate you taking the time to be here today. Great. So before we get into the grant specifics, I wanted to introduce our department. So the Technology and Innovation Office was created to help connect New Mexico's innovation infrastructure to the commercial marketplace. Our mission is to support the growth of technology companies, encourage startup formation, attract businesses to New Mexico, and of course, help existing companies in our state scale up and commercialize their technologies. Our work focuses on 4 priority sectors that will be advanced computing, aerospace and defense, bioscience, and advanced energy and water technologies. Many of the companies that we support are working to solve highly technical problems while creating jobs, attracting investment, and building long-term economic impact here in our great state. And this is just one of the grant opportunities that we have available through our office. And this is how we intend to accomplish that mission of helping New Mexico startups. So we are here to speak about the Science and Technology Business Startup Grant. Actually, before I do that, posting in the chat for everybody some information. So the Science and Technology Business Startup Grant is a competitive state-funded grant that awards non-dilutive funding to help early-stage companies move their technologies closer to commercialization. Applicants are free to request any amount from $25,000 to $50,000. The focus of this grant is to help companies through activities such as customer acquisition, commercialization planning, intellectual property development, validation, market research, and business growth activities. Ultimately, we're looking to support companies that can create jobs, generate economic impact, and continue growing here in New Mexico. This program is intended for early-stage technology companies that have already developed a technology and are working towards commercialization. We are particularly interested in companies that can demonstrate a clear path toward commercial success and, of course, meaningful economic impact within New Mexico. Great. Let's speak about eligibility. To be eligible for this grant, applicants must be physically headquartered in New Mexico and operate as a for-profit science and/or technology company. Applicants must have employees physically working within the state. At least 60% of your employees must be within New Mexico. Companies must also have a valid BTIN number, EIN number, and NAICS code. You must you must provide a letter of good standing from the Taxation and Revenue Office, and also submit a State of New Mexico W-9. All applications should align with one or more of TO's priority sectors and should clearly explain how their technology or service fits within one or more of these sectors and why that alignment is relevant. Uh, Past S&T grantees are eligible to reapply 2 years from the date of their past grant agreement was executed. So unfortunately, if you were a grantee from last year, you are uneligible, but you will be eligible next time. Applicants should carefully review the grant manual to ensure all eligibility requirements are met before beginning an application. You can also reach out to me. I'll have my contact information at the end of this presentation. And in the chat, I just posted a link to our grant manual. You can always reach out and or go to our website. Let's speak a little bit about funding eligibility. So funds may be used for a variety of company-focused activities. This list right here, these are just examples of how past grantees have used grant funds in the past, including intellectual property assessment, patent filing, outside testing and validation, regulatory certifications, customer discovery, investor meetings, market research, data acquisition, and trade show attendance. Please note that trade show expenses may not exceed 10% of the total award amount. So when you're putting together your application and your budget, applicants should ensure that all proposed expenses directly support their commercialization activities. Now, of course, we have some ineligible uses of these funds. Grant funds may not be used for payroll, research and development activities, lab equipment, business equipment, materials and supplies over $100, food, alcohol, or drugs. If you're unsure whether an expense is eligible or not, I strongly recommend that you reach out to our office. Again, I'll have my contact information after this presentation. So we're going to go over the application components because the application requires several pieces of information from your company. So applicants will submit an executive summary, pitch deck, budget table, a budget narrative, growth projections, revenue model, and staffing projections. You'll also be required to provide a letter of good standing from the Tax and Revenue Office of New Mexico, and you will also have to complete a State of New Mexico W-9 with a wet signature. And in your application, just make sure you clearly demonstrate how grant funds will accelerate commercialization and how your technology aligns with at least one of 4 TO sectors. All applications will be reviewed by a review board of technology subject matter experts from around the state. The review board may consider factors such as management team experience, technology innovation, market opportunity, competitive landscape, some business risk, economic impact, and budget alignment. Reviewers may also consider company revenue history and prior funding history when making their decisions. Applicants should focus on telling a clear story about why their technology matters for economic development in New Mexico, how the market opportunity exists, and how grant funding will accelerate growth of the company. This year, our office moved to the submittable platform for all our grant opportunities in order to make the application smoother for applicants. So this is just a couple of screenshots of what the submittable platform looks like. When you click the apply now link on our website, you'll be taken to the submittable page where you'll see a list of our current grant opportunities. I believe we only have one so far, but just please make sure to read the description to make sure that you're applying to the right grant. If you already have a submittable account, you can simply sign in with your existing credentials. If this is the first time using Submittable, you'll be prompted to create a free account. When creating your account, please use your full name and the email address that you check often, because that's how our office is going to communicate with you regarding your application. Once your account is created, up in the top right corner, you'll be able to start an application, save drafts, see submission history, and manage all your profile information from up top. Submittable, it also includes a built-in technical help portal, which you can access from any page by clicking the question mark icon on the top right-hand corner. If you run into any technical issues with the platform, that's the best place to start. But of course, you can always reach out to our office. You can reach out to me through email or phone number, and I can help you with that as well. Great. Let's speak a little bit about award disbursement. So for selected grantees, grant funds will be dispersed following the execution of the grant agreement. Grantees will receive the full award amount upon grant agreement execution. And of course, if you've received TO grant funding in the past, you must be in good standing with our office to receive this additional funding. All funded work must be completed within 12 months of the grant agreement effective date. In addition, a final report must be submitted within 13 months of grant agreement execution. Grantees will be required to submit quarterly milestone reports and quarterly expense reports throughout the grant period. I'll be reaching out to any grantees for that schedule. Grantees are expected to retain documentation supporting all grant expenditures and be able to provide receipts or other supporting documentation if it's requested by our office. And the state of New Mexico will also issue a 1099 tax form to all recipients of state grant funding. So make sure that that you carefully consider these reporting requirements when planning your projects and budgets. Here's a quick timeline of the this specific grant. So last week, applications opened. July 7th, which is 2 weeks from today, applications will be due. They will be due by 5 p.m. Mountain Time, and that is a very strict deadline. We will not accept any late applications. So if you have any questions, you're waiting for a letter of good standing from the Tax and Revenue Office, something like that, please reach out to my office. Please reach out to me directly. So after the review board looks at all applications, finalists may be required to present in person or virtually. We'll definitely reach out for you for that. And I would expect within 2 or 3 months of the grant application close date for any updates if you were denied funding or if you were approved for funding. That is our timeline. All right, and my name again is Esteban Martinez. This is my contact information. That's what I look like. So if you see me at a networking event or a conference or something, make sure to say hi. And we are ready for some questions.
There are a couple in the chat.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Esteban. Hi, everyone. Like Esteban said, let me just confirm, Esteban, can you hear me okay right now?
Yes. Thanks,
Perfect. All right. My apologies for not having my camera on, everybody. I am at a conference right now, hidden away in a room to be on this call, and with my video on, it gets a little bit laggy. So apologies for that, but we'll move on to questions now. So I see a couple in the chat, but you also have the ability to unmute yourself. So if you want to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand, we'll kind of just get to them in the order that we receive them, working through both at the same time. So first question we have is, could you expand on ED&M's definition of R&D? Would product and prototype development be excluded? For this grant, yes. When we talk about R&D, we do talk about product development and prototype development. This grant is focused on business development for the company, not the technology development. So some of the eligible expenses that Esteban mentioned, market research and validation, IP assessment, going to events and conferences. Now, that being said, testing and validation is an eligible expense, but it has to be contracted out through a third party. So if you are looking to test or validate the technology specifically, that can be done through contractors or consultants, but you cannot pay anyone internal to the company to do that, because as Esteban mentioned again, one of the ineligible expenses is payroll. Is the grant taxable? If yes, standard New Mexico GRT rate based location. So we are not tax professionals in our position, so we cannot comment on whether or not the state grant funds are taxed. We would advise you speak to a professional, someone who professionally knows taxes and does taxes, to get more information on that. We do have some standard language that we provide to companies that ask us that question, again, as not being tax experts. So Sergey, if you do want to reach out to Esteban at his email, then he can provide that language to you that gives a little more guidance in that regard. Jeremy, I see you had your hand up if you want to unmute.
Yeah. Hi there, Michael. So thank you, Esteban, for all the information. Quick question for you guys. Is there any limitations on TRL of the technology?
Not for this grant, no. So this grant is typically designed for earlier stage businesses. It's one of our smaller grants. So if we're looking at, companies could have TRLs as early as 1, or, as late as higher. Startups have a very, wide range of definition, and our definition is also quite wide range. So again, as long as you can speak to how these funds will help the, either TRL advance or help the company move forward as far as, business development goes, there shouldn't be any issues there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Marcus.
Hey, Ron, Marcus Halen here. Thanks for the presentation. Great information. Esteban, quick question. Say I use the funds as an example to do customer discovery. I saw on one of your slides, ineligible expense would be payroll. So, but I would be charging my time to the grant funding, right? As part of me getting paid by the company. So am I misunderstanding something when you say I cannot use it for payroll for myself?
Can you rephrase that a bit? So what role do you have in the company?
So I'm the founder and president of Triton Photonics. So if my company gets a grant through this program, and I'd be spending some hours working on customer discovery, for example, would I be charging that, for payroll? If we get paid for those hours, right? Would I not be eligible to do that?
That is correct. So for this grant in particular, you wouldn't be able to pay yourself for that time, but you could pay for the travel, you could pay for the hotels, you could pay for, flights, Ubers, anything like that to support that, but you wouldn't be able to pay yourself for that time.
I see. So it's all the other expenses that go with business development, but not time for the people doing it, right?
For this grant in particular, yes.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. And the other question I had is, are these slides available on your website?
The slides will not be, but a recording of this webinar will be uploaded in the next day or two, so you will be able to reference them.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just to comment just a little bit more on that, again, if you were to hire someone or work with a marketing contractor to do some of that marketing or customer discovery, that is something you could charge. Again, that would just have to be a third-party service offered to the company that you're paying for, not paying someone internal to the company to do that work.
Okay, copy. Thanks.
Of course. A couple more questions in the chat. Is the 2-year gap specific to TO grants only, i.e. not LEDA and JTIP? That is correct. And it is only specific to this particular grant. So if you were a fiscal year 26, and a little clarification there, previous grants, we've gone by fiscal year for the state. Now we're moving to calling them program years. So last year was technically fiscal year 26 for grants. This year is going to be program year 26. So it's a little confusing at the start of the transition, but going forward, the program years will align with the calendar year instead of the state fiscal year, which goes from June to July, which causes a little confusion. So we're trying to sort that out with this. But all to say, recipients of fiscal year 26, last year's Science and Technology Business Startup Grant, aren't eligible to reapply for this grant. If a company has been awarded any of our other funding opportunities in TO in the past year, they are eligible, or if they've been awarded any other state funding or any funding through like the national labs or anything, that is all fine too. Anything except for this particular grant. As far as IP goes, what are the limits for patent attorneys? There aren't really any limits there. Whatever IP work you would need to get done is allowable. That can be forming IP, that can be licensing, that can be international IP, it can be really anything. I would just urge you, as you're thinking about putting your budget together, think about the proportions that you're using for different budget categories. So if the amount you can request is 50,000 and all 50,000 goes towards IP, you better have a pretty good reason why all that funds needs to go towards IP and the company doesn't need any funds anywhere else. Just as kind of like it's not necessarily a red flag, but just an orange flag that if you are using all the funds for one purpose like IP, you better be able to speak to, why you need all those funds for IP. Typically we see things in the range of 5, 10, maybe 20,000 for IP and then some expenses for some other things. Not to say you can't do that, but again, just be careful as you're doing that to make sure you frame the narrative of the budget correctly for what you're using it on. Can you discuss how the review board analyzes risks or benefits of applicants? So Esteban, can you go, was there a slide on the some of the evaluation criteria? I don't remember.
Yes, right here.
There you go. Yes, thank you. So in general, the bulk of the application, there will be, I think it's 8 or 9 questions, I don't remember, asking questions about, what is the problem, what's the solution, what's the team, the market, and then of course you have things like your budget and budget narrative that you'll upload as well. The reviewers are going to look at all that information and specifically be looking at, the potential for growth of the company and specifically for growth in New Mexico. So that's definitely something you want to make sure you speak to is, how these funds will, or how the company has grown and how the company will continue to grow in New Mexico with these funds. And then those risks and benefits just go kind of along with all those different categories, right? So is the market strong? Are you strongly positioned against your competition? Being able to speak to that, reduce the risk there. A good way to frame it is, these are taxpayer dollars that we're investing through this grant, and being able to speak to how the state's investment in your company, even though it's non-dilutive funding, I'm saying investment, but it's non-dilutive funding. We don't take a stake, but it is still taxpayer dollars. So at the end of the day, we are looking to, provide a return to the taxpayers, which typically looks like job creation, which typically looks like, revenue for the company down the road, those sorts of things that can lead to economic growth for the state. So being able to speak to how your, these grant funds and how the company will grow to provide that benefit back to the state of New Mexico and the taxpayers is important and kind of will help reduce that risk benefit analysis that the reviewers look at. All right. Is the grant positioned to fund the scaling of cloud architecture to meet strict business agreement and GXP compliance standards, which is a mandatory prerequisite for market entry? That can depend, Kevin. For this grant, there needs to be novel technology being developed, and typically that means that there would be IP around it. If you have IP around the, potentially an algorithm or coding for that, that could be eligible, but it will need to reference back to, again, one of our priority sectors. So if that coding that there's IP around or that algorithm has applications in an advanced energy sector or in a bioscience sector or in an aerospace and defense sector, then it could be eligible. But again, there needs to be some novel technology being developed, and it needs to have an application within one of our one of our priority sectors in order to be eligible. And if you are curious about more information on that, again, we can, provide more and get a little more information on exactly what your technology is. Could the budget include corporate fees? I think it's a little broad, Jessica. Would you mind clarifying a little bit on that question? Because potentially yes, but potentially no.
Yeah, say that your company is a C Corp. There are all sorts of fees associated with a C Corp, like franchise taxes, filing fees, etc. Those are typically charged yearly, and I'm just wondering if that could be included in the budget.
So it's probably not something we would want to see a large portion of the budget going towards. If you can make an argument, in the budget narrative that providing, using the funds to pay those fees helps the company advance, then it's something you could. But again, it's probably not something we want to see a large portion of the funds going towards. I'll say it's not an ineligible expense, but it's not something we want to, fully fund.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's see. Kevin, our deep tech foundry generates digitally validated medicinal assets for enterprise CDMOs. Okay, not sure if there was a question there, but the next part is, will there be 7% fringe benefits to help pay for ineligible items? If you're asking, for example, for payroll, if you can use it on fringe benefits, we would consider that payroll. So unfortunately, you would not be able to use the funds on fringe benefits for employee payroll. And I'm not sure if that first comment had a question. Oh, wait, was that I see you were going from your previous question. 1 second, let me reanalyze.
Reanalyze.
So again, potentially, I think it would be worth sending an email to Esteban to kind of work that out a little bit more with some more information there, because I think it depends how you apply the technology a little bit. So I would suggest if you want to follow up with Esteban offline, he can provide a little more clarity and information there. And then Jeremy again.
Yes, another quick question for you. Could you speak to us a little bit about the competitiveness of the grant? Is it and the number of grants being awarded and competitors for it?
Definitely.
And then a question to that: are you at the ARPA-E conference by chance? Fusion
I
Industry?
am at the Fusion event. Yes.
That's okay. I might run into you then.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll be here for the rest of the day and then for tomorrow as well. So I'll be on the lookout.
Awesome. Sounds good.
So yeah, competitiveness. In the past, we have definitely seen the grant become a little more competitive, meaning that we've seen a pretty large uptick in applications. So if we go back about 2 years, we had roughly 40 applications. Then in the next year, 50, and last year we had 70 applications. So the number of applications has definitely increased, but the number of awards we've been awarding has also increased. So it's kind of offset that number of applications. So again, for when we had about 40 applications, we awarded 4 grantees. That year, when we had about 50, we awarded 7, I believe it was. And last year, we had a larger increase in the funding available for this grant, and we awarded, Esteban, correct me if I'm wrong, it was 19, correct?
Yes.
19 companies. So actually, overall, if we go 10% with 4 to 40, and now it was kind of 20 to, I believe it was 67 applications. We've actually seen more companies being awarded for how many have been applying in the past couple of years.
Great. Good to know. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Of course. Can you please share your target industries again? Yes, we can.
Right here.
There you go. Yes, aerospace and defense, biosciences, advanced computing, which includes quantum, and then advanced energy and water technologies. Let's see. And again, those sectors can be fairly broad if a technology applies to one of them or is directly in it. They could be eligible. So if you're still kind of on the edge about whether or not you fit into one of those sectors, feel free to reach out to us and we can, kind of talk you through what it looks like and whether or not you would be eligible. And then Nick asked, how much total money will be awarded this year? We typically don't share the number or the amount that we have for funding in the year for grant, but what I can say is that we are expecting to make probably about the same number of awards that we have in previous years. Sorry, not in previous years, but from last year. So it should be fairly consistent with what was awarded last year. I don't see any other questions for now. We'll stick around for Jessica.
How do I
Just
ask a
an
que-
operational question. So do we have to submit the W-9 when we are applying, or only for the companies that are accepted?
You will at the time of applying. It makes the process a bit more straightforward for us and able to work a little bit faster on the back end once we do get working on things. Processes at the state can be a little bit slow. So it just kind of helps us and you get money out the door faster. One note on that I will emphasize is, as Esteban mentioned, we do require a state of New Mexico W-9. There are two W-9s. One is specific for the state of New Mexico and our grant funding, and the other is like a generic New Mexico W-9. In the application, we link to and reference a specific W-9, and you will need to upload that W-9 in order to be eligible. Again, main reason for that is if you upload the incorrect W-9, it slows down our entire process on the back end, and now we're delayed, potentially even a month funding applications. So we do require that specific state of New Mexico W-9 to be uploaded. And again, there's a link to it in the grant application. So it's easy to find, but if you are unsure if you have the right one, you're always welcome to reach out so we can confirm that prior to your application.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then Tracy, I'll get to you in just a second. I think David had a question. Oh, David, you were unmuted and then you muted yourself.
How about now?
Got you now.
I'm buying a technology from Canada. It's a hydrogen replacement for diesel in trucks and ships, locomotives, cars. It removes 95% of the noxious gases that diesel shoots up into the air. But the technology wasn't invented in New Mexico. It was invented in Canada. Does that knock it out? I'm going to get an exclusive license for every country except Canada.
It will not knock it out, no. As long as the company that owns or licenses the technology is headquartered in New Mexico and that company meets all the eligibility requirements, that will not affect the application at all.
And is that technology okay? Hydrogen that replaces diesel in cars?
Absolutely. That would most certainly fall under advanced energy.
Yeah, we've
our
spotted a
definition.
place.
I'll say
We
our
spotted
definition of advanced energy is anything that makes energy cleaner, safer, more efficient, or quote unquote better.
Yeah, we spotted a place in Hobbs because we want to go out. Our first customers we think are the generators in the Permian, the diesel generators in the Permian Basin. Replace them with hydrogen, get rid of the fumes.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that would 100% be eligible, and having a New Mexico specific focus that you can speak to in your application would definitely be great.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. All right, Tracy.
I have a question on the form itself. We've never received any kind of funding, dilutive or non-dilutive.
Okay.
But when I go to submit my application, it tells me I have to upload a supporting document for all previously secured dilutive and non-dilutive funding.
Gotcha. If that's the case, you can just upload like a Word document or a PDF document that says like no previous funding received to date.
Okay.
And that should be fine.
Okay.
And again, for this grant in particular, there is not a requirement, even though that question is required, there is not a requirement for previous funding for the company. Some of our larger grants, like our Advanced Energy Award, do have requirements like that. But for this grant being specifically targeted towards earlier stage companies, there is no requirement to have previous funding into the company.
Okay.
Right. All right, a couple more questions in the chat. Is there another grant available that does address some of the areas brought up by other participants? Fees, payrolls, fringe benefits, R&D? Yes, there are. So, for example, our Advanced Energy Award, we did just award applicants for that grant recently. A press release will be going out, I think, later this week or early next week on that. So keep an eye out for that. But that grant in particular does allow for payroll and does allow for R&D expenses. Likewise, our Quantum Technology Award, which kind of similar case was just recently awarded and should be announcement soon, also allows for things like payroll and R&D to be used for grant funds. Trying to think, I think those are the two grants currently that do allow for those expenses, targeted towards small businesses at least. But our office will have many, we will have funding opportunities coming out throughout the next 6 months, year, with some funding we have through our RD&D fund. So I would say keep an eye out for other grant and future grant funding opportunities that will be present in that'll be coming up soon. And if anybody isn't not signed up for our newsletter and would like to be, we can definitely. Lindsay just posted that in the chat. Thank you, Lindsay. You can sign up for our newsletter at that link below and stay up to date on everything coming out of our office. All right. Next question is, when will awards be announced and funding allocated? Typically, it kind of depends on the grant, but we typically look at about 3 months from when applications are submitted. So let's see. I think July 7th is the close. Yeah, July 7th right there is when the applications close. So within 2 to 3 months, we typically expect to have applications awarded, funded, and a press release put out to announce the applications. And I think Lindsay answered the question about engaging EDD. We have a intake form that you can fill out. That was the first link she sent. That'll get you in contact with our office. There's a little bit of information you can fill out kind of to help guide our conversation on your company, what kind of support you're looking for, what stage you're at, that sort of information. And that'll get you in contact with our office for kind of an initial meeting, and then we can provide resources or discuss grant funding opportunities from there. And then the newsletter is also linked right under that. So if you aren't signed up for that, I would highly encourage you to. That's where we make all announcements on our grants opening, who's been awarded with our grants. We have a newsletter that goes out roughly every month on activity going on in our office and in New Mexico, including events and things like that. So just a great source to stay up to date on entrepreneurship and commercialization in New Mexico. Let's see. Since our Foundry's core commercialization strategy relies on licensing digitally validated biological assets to enterprise CDMOs rather than manufacturing physical widgets in-house, how does the committee measure market entry and business expansion for a purely computational R&D pipeline? Let's see. I mean, assuming it is the end goal would be, I'm assuming, still to either provide those services for that, computational R&D to companies, or to sell it, whatever that might look like. So, the market entry would be essentially any businesses you would plan on selling to, what they look like, what their current, what's currently out there, that would be your competition. So if you don't have, a specific one in line yet, these grant funds can be used to help assess market and market entry. But you will need to speak to, in general, currently what your research has shown, what markets you currently think might be available for entry, and kind of what your general idea is right now. Let's see, given that payroll and direct R&D materials are ineligible, does the grant cap the percentage of funds we can allocate to enterprise software licensing, data ingestion APIs, cloud computing infrastructure, etc.? It does not. So except for trade shows being capped at 10%, no other expenses are capped with this grant in particular. So you can use those funds, again, as long as it's not on the ineligible expenses that are listed. The eligible expenses listed were just kind of what we commonly see most often that applicants apply for, things like IP, market, customer acquisition, and Esteban's going back towards it. Yeah. IP, patent filing, outside lab testing and validation, assessments, certifications, market entry, market research, those sorts of things. Nothing else is capped. So that would be an eligible expense. But I'll kind of reiterate what I did before, where if you are planning on spending, like, for example, the full 50,000 that you're requesting, if that is what you were requesting for, software licensing and APIs and computing infrastructure, you need to be able to speak in the budget narrative very clearly as to why all the funds are needed for that, and how that will advance the company. So just keep that in mind. And specifically advance the company towards market entry and commercialization. That being the focus of this grant, as Esteban mentioned. And again, this is for startup companies, so we're not expecting you to have that fully built out and be at a point where you are ready for commercialization by the end of this grant. But being able to speak to how this grant advances you towards commercialization. And then there will be a question about your 3 to 5 year plan, where you can speak to ideally what the company will look like and what kind of resources you will need to reach certain milestones in that 3 to 5 year period. I don't see any more questions. We will stick around kind of for the next couple minutes, 5 minutes or so, just in case any questions do come up or anything like that. But at this point, we'll kind of start closing out the webinar. If you have any questions, again, please reach out to Esteban. He'll be your point of contact for this grant. His information is listed there again. But thank you, everybody, for joining. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing your applications.
Thank you so much, Michael, for conducting the Q&A session. And for anybody that joined late, this is being recorded. By the end of the day or tomorrow, the recording will be available on our website and our YouTube channel. So you'll be able to see the whole thing, including the Q&A session as well. You can always reach out to me. And thanks again, everybody.
Yes, have a good day.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going ahead and going to end the event. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks, everybody.